Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamodiraye. Thank you very much. Reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, Chapter 2, Text 62. Krishna is going to take the discussion in the next two verses, 62, 63, describing what happens to a person who is not Vasyahi Yasya Indriyani, yesterday's verse, yes? Who is not Yukta Asita Matparaha, who is not engaged, who does not have his senses fully under his control, and who is not Yukta, engaged in Krishna consciousness, and who also therefore does not have a higher taste. So what happens to him? Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsa Sangas Teshu Pajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kamaha Kamat Krodho Vijayate. Sangateshu. So there is a development. There are 8 steps in this. 4 steps are given here. 4 in the next verse. The first step of a person who doesn't have a higher taste is that it's one or the other, higher taste or this. So the first step is he'll dhyayata. He'll contemplate Vishayan, the objects of the senses. And then secondly, he'll develop Sangha, some kind of, he'll always want to be close to them. Sangha. He'll develop attachment. Teshu, in those things. iPod, iPhone, you get the picture. Desirable. The things I want. Objects of desire. Upajayate. So he'll think about them, he'll get attached to them. And from this sangha, this association, this attachment, kama, he will desire, he will long for them. You see, you either long for Krishna or you long for these objects themselves. There's only 2 options. And it's funny, although it's inanimate, all these objects of desire are inanimate. They're not people, they're not sentient. But a person develops all these kinds of attachment. And longing is the longing that's meant for Krishna is transposed to the objects of the senses. And finally, Kamat Krodha Vijayati. What will result from his longing not being fulfilled, he'll become angry. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. 4 steps. Srila Prabhupada writes, one who is not Krishna conscious is subjected, means must be subjected to material desires. while contemplating the objects of sense. So this is the point. We earlier discussed a person who is Krishna conscious. His thoughts, his engagement are all to do with Krishna, matpara. And one who is not like that, then he must be subjected to material desires. He must be subjected to the contemplation of material longings. That was the word that was used, kama. Kama has, Prabhupada writes, desire, but it also means wish, what you wish for, and also what you long for, what you desire very deeply. So it is one or the other. So either one controls his senses through a higher taste, or he must desire to enjoy the objects of the senses. Now, now Srila Prabhupada goes into an interesting part of the purport. There's something startling. He's going to tell us about the influence of the senses. Now, this is to do with this point, if you remember yesterday, that the senses require real engagement, Prabhupada writes. And that was the point of yukta. Yukta asita matpara. That they must, you can't just agree to the idea, you must actually be doing it. So, you must be engaged. Real engagement. So, and if they are not engaged in transcendental loving service of the Lord, they will certainly seek engagement in the service of materialism. So here's the startling point. In the material world, everyone, now the word everyone is described, including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. That's pretty big, everyone. This is including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. To say nothing of others is subject to the influence of sense objects. Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma even are subject to the influence of sense objects. And the only method to get out of this is to become Krishna conscious. It's the only. In other words, even Lord Shiva is not exempt from this law of nature. This law that you must have material desires if you're not Krishna conscious. So Prabhupada gives the example how Kartikeya was born, because he was agitated for sense pleasure by Parvati. So now Lord Shiva is a very, very great personality. Yet the example is being given by the Acharyas, by Srila Prabhupada, to illustrate that it's not so easy to overcome this desire to gratify the senses. And Prabhupada compares Lord Shiva to Haridas Thakur, who was able to resist such a temptation. And Prabhupada says, because of his unalloyed devotion to Lord Krishna. And then Srila Prabhupada goes back to Sri Yamunacharya, saying that a sincere devotee of the Lord is one who shuns all material sense enjoyment. So the emphasis is on the word all. Due to his higher taste for spiritual enjoyment in devotional association of the Lord. That is the secret of success, Srila Prabhupada writes. So, again and again, Srila Prabhupada, who is not just a teacher, but he's actually a trainer. He's training us. He's guiding us how to achieve this status, this difficult status. I mean, we all have to admit, if Lord Shiva's name comes in, you have to admit, we're not talking about something easy. If Lord Shiva can also fall prey, we're not talking about something easy. It's not a walkover. It's not easy. You cannot just do it casually. This requires great care, great caution, how to do it very, very carefully so that there is no mistake. We're going to go into that more. This about care and caution. So Prabhupada makes the obvious conclusion: one who is not therefore in Krishna consciousness, however powerful he may be in controlling the senses by artificial repression, is sure ultimately to fail. For the slightest thought of sense pleasure will agitate him to gratify his desires. Now this is also very significant, that yukta asita matpara, the person who is engaged in Krishna consciousness, he is exempt. That means Krishna is exempt. Lord Shiva is not exempt, Lord Brahma is not exempt, no other living entity is exempt, but Krishna is exempt. He is not. Not only Krishna is exempt, but his devotee is exempt. He is not influenced. Prabhupada gave the example of Haridas Thakur. So now in text 63, Srila Prabhupada is going to use the purport to talk about Yukta Vairagya. So this class is very important if you want to understand Yukta Vairagya, because there's a lot. Prabhupada devotes almost the entire purport to discussing Yukta Vairagya in this verse. The verse reads, Krodhat bhavati sammoha. This is the fifth step. From anger, bhavati sammoha. There is bewilderment, or one is put into illusion. Sammohat smriti vibrama. His smriti, his memory is vibrama, is lost or bewildered. Smriti brahmshat buddhi nasha. The intelligence, the buddhi nasha, is destroyed, is lost. And buddhi nashat pranashyati. One is completely ruined. He falls down. From anger, complete delusion arises. And from delusion, bewilderment of memories. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So there's a number of key points to observe just in this translation before we go into the purport. First of all, the word is used pranashyati. Pranashyati actually means completely destroyed, but Prabhupada writes falls down. Why is that? Because the soul cannot be destroyed. We already know that. So he is destroyed in the sense that he loses his spiritual consciousness. He is ruined in the most effective manner possible. What is the ruin for the soul? Is that he doesn't know he's the soul. He thinks I'm the body. That is complete ruin. And not only that, he is ruined because he cannot get the higher taste. See, that's the, for a devotee, this is the most significant part. Because if you remember, everything is hinging on the higher taste. Do you remember? Everything. The whole experience of Krishna consciousness is resting on your ability to experience a relationship with Krishna when you're performing devotional service. So if you cannot experience that, you are lost. That's a big time problem. That's a big hurdle. And that's what a person is in. That's the position he's in. When he embarks on this process of harmlessly indulging his senses. When you think of your sense objects, it looks harmless. Nice flower, nice garden, Nice house, oh, nice car. It starts. You know that story about, I think the name was used, Ramesh and his dhoti. How many of you know Ramesh and his dhoti? How many of you don't know Ramesh and his dhoti? Oh dear. We're missing out on a lot of skits in ISKCON, right? We used to have all these skits performed that Guruji told Ramesh, you stay on the Ganga and you chant Hare Krishna. You know? So Ramesh said, yes. Yes, Guruji. So he's chanting, but his dhoti gets wet. He needs another dhoti. So the rat starts to eat the dhoti while he's drying. So what's the cure for driving away a rat? A cat. But a cat gets hungry. What does it want? Cow's milk. So how do you get cow's milk? From a CO, the cow. From a cow. Only she can give you milk. Of course, some people think you go to a store, but you need a cow to get the milk. How do you get the milk from a cow unless somebody... Ramesh has to be supposed to be doing Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So he needs a wife. So it started with one dhoti. Right? All the way. So Guruji comes, he sees the whole bungalow. Ramesh, what happened? Oh, Guruji. Oh, it's a long story. Guruji said, I know it's a long story. Anyway, we used to have these skits in ISKCON. Every Sunday feast, the guests would be entertained with one of these.
We used to do it on the road.
You used to do what?
On the road.
On the road. Yes, on the street, yes, on the street. That's true, even in London, right on the street, we used to do a drama, right there. Like Harinam, stop, do a drama, and then explain, right on the street. So, anyway, devotees were very good. So, the higher taste is just. That's pranashya. Now, so I mentioned that this purport, Prabhupada is going to talk about Yukta Vairagya. What does that mean in the words that we've been using so far? It means that he is going to explain that the objects of the senses, as employed by a devotee in the service of the Lord, they do not have the same effects. Okay? That's Prabhupada's purport. In other words, higher taste is such an amazing ingredient that even when you are handling the objects of the senses, they do not take you down to the path of degradation. That's the amazing thing about having a higher taste. For yukta asita matpara, using things for Krishna service. Now, I would request everyone to pay very careful attention to everything that's going to be said, because it's a fine line. It's a fine line between engaging the objects of the senses for Krishna service and falling down. It's a very fine line. So if you miss it, you miss it. Please be as attentive as you possibly can. So first thing to remember is that all of this is only possible for a person who has a relationship with Krishna. What we're going to discuss, what Prabhupada is going to say, is only possible for a person who actually has a higher taste. He's already in a relationship with Krishna. In other words, let's suppose he's not in a relationship with Krishna, but he says, no, Prabhu, this Mercedes car, this $100 million is Yukta Vairagya. Saying it is not going to help you. Even if you said this 5 rupees is in Krishna service, even that can make you fall down. So what is the key? The first key is that you have to already be in a relationship with Krishna before you start to use things for Krishna. Before you say Yukta Vairagya, you must already experience a higher taste. Okay? So the other point is that the higher taste itself is not a position of being away from the objects of the senses. That's the other point. In other words, if you ask yourself, because earlier, if you remember, I said there's material sense gratification on the one hand and higher taste on the other. Now you might think that if anybody comes close to the objects of the senses, he's not in a higher taste. That's a mistake. Okay? Do you understand how it's getting difficult now? Simply being close to the objects of the senses or not being close to them does not mean that you have a higher taste or you don't. It means, how do you handle the objects of the senses? Are they used for your sense gratification, or are they used because of your relationship with Krishna? You see, if you go back to 3 classes back, I gave the example of a bank clerk. You remember a bank clerk? He handles a lot of money, but he doesn't feel it's his, right? Because he already knows, he has a relationship with the bank. This is the bank's money, or rather even the customer's money, but not his. There's no sense of possession. So when the devotee who has a sense that Krishna is my worshipable Lord, everything is for his satisfaction. Now the objects of the senses are not going to act in this way. Dhyayato Vishyan Pumsa Sangasnesho Pajayate Sangat Sanjay, all the way down to Pranashyati. They don't have that effect. Okay? So now, this point has 2 effects. One is it's reassuring to a devotee. The other is that it's also very dangerous. In other words, it's because the objects of the senses are so close to you. If you make a mistake of thinking, I am doing Yukta Vairagya, but you're not, that object of the sense is going to make you fall down. You will fall down. Because this law will kick in. Dhyayato, contemplation, attachment. Attachment, lust. Lust, anger. Anger, illusion. Illusion, memory is lost. Memory is lost, intelligence is lost. Intelligence is lost, you fall down. Right? So that kicks in immediately. It's very dangerous. Prabhupada also gave the example of fire. Fire. An expert cook makes nice preparations using fire. But if you're a little careless, fire is there and you're very close to it, what will it do? It'll burn you. Knife, a knife. Very good for cutting, very good for surgery. One mistake, you kill the person. So these are material, these are to do with the body examples. Spiritually, it's even more dangerous. Because one slight mistake, immediately you will fall down. So therefore, there's a danger side, but it's also reassuring. Reassuring because if you are in a relationship with Krishna, then the guarantee is none of this will affect you. For example, go back to the bank clerk. If the bank clerk is honest, he has no intention of abusing his position. Any gain for the bank is not his, any loss is not his. He's detached. He's very reassured in his honesty. He's not afraid. You see, so it's fearful as well as causing you to become fearless, depending on your position, your situation. Now, Srila Prabhupada's purport. Srila Rupa Goswami has given us this direction. Prapanchikataya buddhya hari sambandhi vastuna mumukshubhi parityago vairagyam phalgu kartate. By development of Krishna consciousness, one can know that everything has its use in the service of the Lord. So, here's a philosophical point. Everything, all the objects of the senses, have their use in the service of the Lord. Nothing to do with us. This world, with its sky, its air, with its mountains, its planets, with its opulences, exists for the pleasure of the Lord. Even we exist for the pleasure of the Lord. So everything has its utility in the service of the Lord. Those without knowledge of Krishna consciousness avoid material objects, and as a result they desire liberation from material bondage. So because they don't have this understanding of the utility of everything in Krishna service, for them the only way they can relate with matter, sense objects, is to keep away from it. Now you know how easy that is. It's not easy to keep away from material things, even in Vrindavan. You know? You go to Loy Bazaar, which dhoti, which kurta, which sari, you know, right? So on and so forth. Which color? It just, you know, it's so easy. It's just so easy to go down the slippery slope. On the other hand, just to finish that part, they do not attain to the perfect state of renunciation. Their so-called renunciation is called phalgu, or less important. On the other hand, a person in Krishna consciousness knows how to use everything in the service of the Lord. Therefore, he does not become a victim in the way the phalgu person does. For example, Prabhupada gives that an impersonalist cannot enjoy eating, because for him eating is one of the sense gratifications, and he tries to avoid eating nice eatables. Whereas a devotee, he offers everything to Krishna for his enjoyment, and he takes that as prasad, remnants. And when he does that, he's not affected by kama. He's not affected by lust. The whole process, it acts like a vaccination. You know vaccination? Right? Who doesn't understand vaccination? Okay, you know you have some disease, virus you get sick from. So vaccination uses the same disease, the same virus, gives you it in such a way that it builds your immunity to that virus. It actually, the vaccine is nothing but the disease itself, injected into you, but in such a way that it strengthens you against it. So even though eatables normally would make a person fall down, the tongue is the most voracious. It takes you into material life. But when you are habituated to offering everything to Krishna, it's a deep science which we'll discuss in the 4th chapter more. But the effect it has, it minimizes your desires. It's an amazing, it's a vaccination. It's a vaccination. Instead of increasing your disease, it takes it away, it takes it down. So Prabhupada is explaining Yukta Vairagya, how to use sense objects in such a way that they do not act upon you to make you fall down, to make you lose your higher taste, to take you away from Krishna. If you do it correctly, then you will become immunized against material sense attraction. Sense attraction is a very powerful force that even Lord Shiva, he acts as an example to illustrate how powerful it is. Lord Shiva is a very, very powerful personality. He's not an ordinary personality. He's extraordinary. Yet he is subject to the influence of the senses. Therefore, Yukta Vairagya is not something casual. It's a very scientific process of using all the things that we can see, touch, taste, smell, and hear in such a way that they decrease your lust. So that's an art that has to be learned under the guidance, under the training of an experienced spiritual master who himself is very nicely situated in higher taste. So in the last part of the purport, Srila Prabhupada goes to the actual verse. The impersonalist therefore cannot enjoy life due to his artificial renunciation, and for this reason a slight agitation of the mind pulls him down again into the pool of material existence. So this is called patanti atha, when a person falls down. It started with this 3 verses ago, pramatini haranti prasabam mana, that the senses are so powerful that they forcibly take away the mind of a person who is even endeavoring to control them, vipaschita, even of a learned person. And they cause us to fall down. So that's what happens. If you slightly, even if you slightly miss this idea that I'm a humble servant of Lord Krishna. That's the important thing. And you will miss that idea if you don't have a relationship with Krishna. But if you have a relationship with Krishna, there's no such fear. Okay. I thought it would take me the whole of 1 hour to explain this too, but I have time enough to cover text 64. Text 64 discusses sadhana bhakti. This is the verse that Krishna is explaining sadhana bhakti, but with a difference. This is sadhana bhakti based on a higher taste.
Can you repeat the last statement regarding unity?
About?
Unity.
Yeah, that we have to be firmly situated in the identity that I'm a servant of Krishna. Remember the bank clerk? See, the bank clerk, he shouldn't have any spell of madness thinking, oh, this money's mine. Otherwise he's he's in trouble, right? If a bank clerk thinks for a moment that this money is mine, he's in trouble. So we should make sure that at no point in my life I entertain the idea that everything is for me. All this is for me. I am the enjoyer. If that idea enters, it's very dangerous. However, there is a way to ensure that it will never enter. What was the answer I gave? What was the answer I gave? That there's one way to make sure it never enters, that idea never enters. If you have a, with a H-I-G, with a higher, that's the point. You work on that. You make sure I have a relationship with Krishna. Then everything becomes safe and secure. There's no danger. But if you miss that, if the bank clerk forgets, I'm a humble bank clerk, all that money is going to get to his head. Okay, text 64. So this verse, as I was saying, is sadhana bhakti based on the principle of a higher taste. Raga dvesha vimuktestu vishayan indriyais charan atma vasyair vidheyatma prasadam adhigacchati. So here, Krishna says, you can become free from two of these qualities which are problematic. Because remember, you lose your higher taste if you think I'm what? I'm attached, raga. I'm attached to some vesha. I like something and I don't like something. Okay? This is what I like, this is what I don't like. You know, sometimes children, they say, my favorite color. You know, my favorite fruit, my favorite something. So many. Color is a good one. I like this, I hate this color. They're too much conditioned to train to think what I like, what I don't like. That's called raga dvesha. Okay? But raga also means a passionate feeling, an affection. And dvesha not only means detachment, it means hatred, dislike, enmity. So all these qualities are very dangerous. Vimuktes, you can become free. You can become from Vishayan Indriyais Charan. Atma Vashya Vidheyatma. This is called sadhana bhakti. By living a life of regulation. Vidheya Atma. Vidheya. Vidheya Atma means Atma that follows Vidhi. Vidhi means rules and regulations. This is what he does, this is what he doesn't do. That controls your raga dvesha, your likes and your dislikes. And such a person, prasadam adhigacchati, he's a recipient, he's eligible for the mercy of the Lord, for the kindness, for the grace, for the favor, for the kripa of the Lord, prasadam. But a person free from all attachment and aversion and able to control his senses through regular principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. So Krishna is saying, you don't have a higher taste, right? What do? You are subject to the influence of the sense objects. They can make you fall down. What does he do? He should do sadhana bhakti with a higher taste. He should cultivate a higher taste while doing sadhana, while living a life of regulative principles. So there's two purposes to sadhana bhakti. One is to control his attachment and aversion, and the other is to gain the higher taste. That's the purpose. You see. It's not just to control your attachment and aversion, but it also is to obtain the mercy of the Lord, which is the higher taste. In other words, what is the mercy of the Lord? To have a relationship with Him. You know this word in Hindi? Tiraskar. Yeah? Tiraskar means to put a distance between somebody, to throw to break a relationship. Right? Tiraskar. So because you don't have a higher taste, we are in a position of tiraskar. We are broken away. So sadhana bhakti will help you control your attachment and aversion and repair this distant this distance with Krishna. Prasadam adhigacchati. We are eligible to have by doing this sadhana. Okay, so let's proceed. But there's what's called a converse reading of this verse as well, with a slightly different view. Suppose you have a param drishta, you have some higher taste, you have a relationship with Krishna. Then to follow this sadhana bhakti becomes blissful. The process becomes wonderful. In other words, because of this relationship with Krishna, it's so easy to overcome your attachment and your aversion. It's so easy to indriya vash, to have your senses under control. So it's both. You try to get a higher taste. With whatever higher taste you have, it's easier to follow. By following sadhana bhakti, you get a higher taste. With a higher taste, you're able to follow. It's mutually reinforcing, both of them. So that's why it's said that even a pure devotee, he will observe sadhana bhakti also, because it's conducive for his lifestyle of being Krishna conscious. And Krishna gives prasada to the pure devotee in a different way. He already has a higher taste, but he enjoys newer and newer nava rasa. We were discussing Yamunacharya yesterday. He experiences a new humor every moment, right? So that's what sadhana bhakti does. It is already explained that one may externally control the senses by some artificial process, but unless the senses are engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is every chance of a fall. Although the person in full Krishna consciousness may apparently be on the sensual plane, because of his being Krishna conscious, he has no attachment to sensual activities. The Krishna conscious person is concerned only with the satisfaction of Krishna and nothing else. Therefore, he is transcendental to all attachment and detachment. So Prabhupada says that if Krishna wants, the devotee can do anything which is ordinarily undesirable to him. And if Krishna does not want, he shall not do that which he would have ordinarily done for his own satisfaction. Then he says, therefore, to act or not to act is within his control, because he acts only under the direction of Krishna, or only for the pleasure of Krishna. This consciousness is the causeless mercy of the Lord. That a devotee is able to act for Krishna is the prasad. People say, Maharaj, please bless me. Sometimes their idea of what is bless them and what is Gita's idea of what is blessing are two different ideas. The idea of blessing is that one is able to have a direct relationship with Krishna. See, that is so wonderful. People don't know what they should aspire for. They think they should aspire for Janam, Dhanam, Sundarim, Kavita. They think they should want these material. They're not possessions. They do not enhance your life. But if you have a relationship with Krishna, then you have everything. It's that story of Duryodhana and Arjuna asking for Krishna's help. Remember? Duryodhana wanted Krishna's army, and Arjuna wanted Krishna. See, that's the prasad. So if you don't know, you will ask Krishna for the wrong thing, right? But if you're like Arjuna, you'll ask for him, and that's Krishna's. That's the mercy. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?